All right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I am happy to have with us today Sharif Mohr from the Drug Free America Foundation. Thanks for joining me today.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So Sharif does a lot of research and monitors trends. And so we're going to talk about opioid trends today. So what have you found the trends being now?
Well, so now primarily we're seeing synthetic opioids, dominating the opioid epidemic. We've moved away from heroin, and now mostly what we're seeing is people that are using fentanyl. As a matter of fact, I don't know if heroin is even available anymore anywhere in the United States. It's pretty much been completely displaced by fentanyl, and that's an evolution that happened over time. We're currently in what a lot of experts are calling the fourth wave of the opioid epidemic, where it's not only just the synthetic opioids, but also it's polysubstance use, primarily opioids with the amphetamine type stimulants, mostly amphetamine. So what happened, the first wave, which started in the 1990s, that started with the pill mills and OxyContin. Now, while this was happening, the Mexican cartels, who, they are very crafty, they knew that it was just a matter of time before the government was going to begin to clamp down on, these pill mills and all this loose prescribing. So then they started developing their own heroin producing capabilities. And that's what ushered in the second wave of the opioid epidemic. So once those restrictions were put into place and it was harder to, get prescriptions for the OxyContin, the Mexican cartels stepped in to fill that gap. And that started in 2010 and lasted roughly until 2014 when fentanyl came on the scene. And that was just a matter of time. I mean, fentanyl it does have licit uses as a painkiller for severe pain, for cancer. It's been around a long time, and it's been used as an adulterant in heroin since the 1990s. It's a matter of economics because it's so potent. It's about 50 times more potent than heroin. And to produce a kilo of heroin, you need an acre of poppies. It has to be the right time of the year, the growing season. Then you have to have workers, harvest the gum, and then you have to take it to a lab, and then it undergoes a chemical process. And that's just to produce one kilo. So it's a very time intensive, labor intensive process. And, that will retail wholesale for about $40,000 on the market. Fentanyl can be made, you don't need any land. You just need a laboratory, some very cheap and easily available chemicals, and you can churn out a kilo of fentanyl in actually, just a matter of hours. And then you have 1 million doses, at a wholesale cost of $4,000. So it's a no-brainer.
That is insane that the progress in the wrong direction for us doing the prevention work, but it's just, it's wow. It's mind-blowing is what it is.
Yeah. Yes.
So what Drug Free America does is you use this information to then drive policy and strategies. What policy is this driving for you guys?
Well, I think really because now we're in a new era, of substance use. We've moved away from, these resource intensive, time intensive, plant-based drugs like cocaine, opium and heroin now. And we've entered into this era of the novel or the new psychoactive substance, where you can make millions of doses in a fraction of the time at a fraction of the cost. So obviously supply reduction is a valid strategy. but that's not, that's not going to work as a standalone strategy, because what happens is with these new psychoactive substances, most of them are not subject to international controls. And these clandestine chemists in China or Mexico or India or wherever they are, they're getting these formulas from failed patents, and they'll tweak it a little bit, and it's not scheduled. So that was, with the case with acetylfentanyl in China. And then the Chinese, cracked down on that. And then they came out with something else like OC fentanyl. Finally, China, they passed some legislation banning or tightly controlling like 1,400 different fentanyl analogs. So then what happened is these chemists, they came up with this new set of compounds called the benzimidazole opioids, which are really, really frightening because they're even more potent than fentanyl. They cause much more severe respiratory depression, a much steeper dose response curve. So it's like a game of chemical whack-a-mole. You ban one thing and they just tweak a molecule, or they'll come up with a whole other compound. So just law enforcement and supply reduction isn't going to solve the problem. This is where we really need to get back to prevention, because we know that prevention works. I know a lot of people, they criticize, like the Just Say No campaigns of the 80s. Well, actually, the data show that those were really effective, because in the 80s, we had the lowest rates, of drug use in generations. So I think really the answer to this is prevention, lies with prevention.
Yes, absolutely. And I love it when research gets brought back to prevention as well. How about with us being in the middle of this pandemic? How has that affected opioid use? Have you seen it gone up since the pandemic started?
Yes, unfortunately, the conditions that have sprung up as a result of the pandemic and the measures to combat the pandemic, they've accelerated drug use. Because the shelter-in-place orders, the disruptions in the job market, all of these things have caused people to feel a lot more anxiety, a lot more depression, a lot more, boredom, and just the general sense of uncertainty has caused a lot of people to turn to substances. People that maybe they weren't users before, but now as a result of the stress, related to COVID-19, they've picked up and started using. And then established users, one of the I think the unintended consequences of the stimulus checks that we got was it fueled this rise in drug use, not only in drug use, but in overdose deaths, because a lot of people now, because of the shelter in place, they're using alone. And at the beginning of the pandemic in March, when the border was shut down, that caused a little bit of a reduction in the supply for synthetic opioids. It's come roaring back since then. But for a while, there were some supply issues. So that forced a lot of users to seek out new unknown sources, and that carries a greater risk of, adulteration with, a lethal synthetic opioid or analog that you're not used to, even if you're tolerant. So that, combined with using at home alone with nobody around, nobody there to be able to administer naloxone, you saw just overdoses increasing exponentially.
Yeah. And you sparked a question when you were talking about the using alone, because we're all fairly isolated, some more than others right now. So the naloxone does work on these new synthetics that are being developed. We can still use that as a rescue?
We can, yeah.
Okay, good. Good.
Yes.
Good.
Sometimes, one danger always is that, paramedics are on the scene. They might not have enough to reverse, a carfentanil overdose, where you might need to be hit 14 times. They might not have that much naloxone in the ambulance. So you're taking your life in your hands. But this addiction, opioid use disorder, opioid addiction, it completely hijacks the brain. So, an opioid user that's on the edge of withdrawal, that's not going to deter them at all. So.
Sure. Well, thank you so much for joining me. I'm going to put the Drug Free America Foundation's website in the comments because you guys do have a lot of good resources. And I'd like to have you on again to discuss your marijuana research if you would like to do that.
Oh, absolutely. I'd love to.
Okay. Well, it was nice meeting you and thanks for joining me. Happy holidays.
Thank you. You too. Happy holidays. It was a pleasure. Bye-bye.